Greetings to all our viewers, all our learners. Welcome to the lecture on Dimensions of Globalization, the political dimensions. I am Dr. Amna. I teach political science at the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee College for Women, University of Delhi. The lecture today is divided over three parts. In the first part, we will look at the basic ideas that are driving globalization. For that, we will try to understand the definitions of globalization. Followed by that, we will have an idea as to how is the process of globalization impacting the state, the nation, the domestic policy making. And then in the end, we will be having a look at certain readings and references for literature review that we can take help of for our further studies. When we talk about globalization, we all know that it is a very complex process. What we witness right now in global affairs, that world is becoming highly interconnectedness. Now, an example of this interconnectedness can be seen from economic, social, cultural contracts and ties amongst others. Now, intensification of global interconnectedness is because of certain factors which we have to take into account right now. Today, because of rampant increase in technology, communication, new forms are being developed every hour. This has resulted in the world becoming what Marshall McLuhan once said, global village. This has led to shrinking of barriers of space and time. This is why today, when we look at the world, distances are seen to be much shorter than it was when we looked at the world from the earlier times. Now, this instant communication, the times of increase in technological innovation has led to the ideas of boundaries being blurred, because these communication, they cut across national boundaries. Today, in a fraction of a second, information and communication travels, and this has definitely aided in the flow of goods, people, services, information and ideas. So what we say here is, what is local is connected to the global, and what is global is connected to be what is being said as local. Developments in one region have a significant consequence for security, peace, well-being, policy making in even distant regions of the globe. So therefore, at this hour, what we are seeing here is that globalization, if we can borrow from the ideas of Nain and Koshi from the article in Economic and Political Weekly, that it has had a profound impact on the political institutions existing within a nation state, and also on the discourse of national and international issues. In the process of changing the nature of the state, in the process of changing the dynamics of the market-state interaction and other interstate system, one can also witness that is a new political order that is being fashioned. Now, this political order at the global level is also being questioned with time, because if we see that today, one cannot ignore that there are questions being pointed out over the unequal aftermath of globalization. Globalization led to widening of scope of market forces, widening of scope for non-state actors to compete and coexist with state actors. It led to deepening impact and speeding up of inter-regional flows and networks of interaction. The outcome of it was that it definitely impacted all realms of human activity. As we take our learning, we will try to have a specific focus on the political dimension. With intensification of global finance, trade, investments, rise in migration, increase in flows of trade, one also saw speeding up of global interactions, global transportation and communication systems, and this blurred the idea of territory that was integral to define a nation state. This definitely raised challenges for the notion of sovereignty, that I am in absolute control of my domestic territory and law. So therefore, global forces which led to global trade and finance, it is often argued that these are the forces that cannot be ignored. And at the same time, isolation today remains a problematic term because the forces permeate within. This is why they have made territory and sovereignty as porous, and an outcome of that is difficulties for countries to isolate themselves from the larger global aspect. Economic integration of the world economy, consolidation of national economies towards the world economy, as we saw in the rise of international organizations and treaties like the WTO, IMF, World Bank, increasing role of multinational and transnational corporations and organizations in the global economy. This economic integration, if at one point of time it led to new avenues for countries to integrate in global economy, more avenues for jobs and employment, but at the same time it has limited, it is argued, the range of policy options available to the state, because states are bandwagoned into the liberalization, privatization, disinvestment realm, wherein there is decline of the public sector. Now, when we talk about the political dimension of globalization, the notion of sovereignty is very essential. Sovereignty, if we are to define, it is about absolute authority over a certain territory. No doubt in times of globalization, absolute authority over a certain territory has been challenged because the decision making apparatus and the mechanism of the state is impacted by forces which exist beyond the specified dimension of territory. Impact of the global financial crisis existing in one part of the globe has an impact on the national economic policy of a particular state. Today, this is why economies are tied to each other, and at the same time they bear the aftermath of crisis and ups and downs together. Therefore, it is argued that capitalism and neoliberal other issues have the driving forces of globalization have changed the nature of state sovereignty. If we are to take the words of David Held, that is, sovereignty is a contested phenomena. Now, today what we look here is that one of the guiding factors of state was sovereignty. In the works of the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the state had obligation towards its citizen, and that was creation of sovereignty. Modern authors have also changed this idea of obligation that has existed within the concept of sovereignty. If we are to take from Kofi Annan's famous speech, that is Two Concepts of Sovereignty, it identified a shift from pure state sovereignty to human sovereignty, in which well-being of the individual was of utmost importance, and it was the state's duty to guarantee this well-being. Now, when we look at sovereignty here, that is the idea of autonomy within the international order, this is definitely challenged, revisited, and being revised as we try to understand the dynamics of global forces that are leading to globalization. Now, when we try to understand globalization, its economic dimension has a huge impact on the political dimension. So, for the simplicity of our learning, we will first try to understand economic globalization. Economic globalization is a process of integration towards single shared global economy, and this idea of single shared global economy can be seen from the working of international organization, new kinds of non-state actors, multinational and transnational organization. Now, this competition for investment, competition for tracking and tapping global finance, avenues of investment has made states beholden on MNCs and other kinds of non-state actors' commercial preferences, because what drives the neoliberal forces or the forces of capitalism is the need to secure profit. So therefore, there have been avenues wherein state has given more primacy to their commercial preferences in order to tackle and tap in their services. Now, at the same time, when we talk about trade liberalization, one cannot ignore that liberalization coexists and has to be seen in tandem with decrease in the role of public sector or phenomena like disinvestment. That is, at the same time, if there is failure of the public sector, the national sector, to deliver the desired goods and services, the state has resorted to market mechanisms to get the goods and services. Now, this not only has put huge strains on the public sector, but has also depicted decline of faith in the ability of the state to organize and manage production of goods and services. Today, when we look at globalization, there is emergence of free trade, market competition, multinational organization, international organization. Today, we are witnessing trading blocs like European Union, NAFTA, APEC, ASEAN. Now, all of it, in its impact, it has limited the scope of operations of state sovereignty in the sphere of international economic relations, because today with the blurring of space-time distinction and space-time compression, global and local cannot be distinguished. In such a phenomena wherein nations said that international trade is a prerogative of the particular national government of a state, within the same country, its other subunits, when we look at it from a federal apparatus, its other states and provinces have raised issue wherein the division of power from the federal perspective was challenged. Today, there is increasing international interdependence, and this has also compelled the state to accept limitations on its external sovereignty, because each state is bound to accept the rules of international economic system. For example, when we look at the working of WTO as a multilateral treaty is having a bearing on the domestic policy making. It is often argued that WTO is Janu Facet, because at one point of time it offers an avenue for sorting out international global commercial trade disputes, but at the same time it also has a bearing wherein the states are supposed to change their national policy in light of the new directives and treaties of WTO. So therefore, international conventions and treaties are having a limitation on the ambit of state domestic power. All states, once they are signing and ratifying the rules and norms laid down by several such conventions, are bound to make changes in the domestic policy making of their respective states in order to fulfill its commitment. Non-fulfillment of commitments definitely imply some kind of sanctions, some kind of other punishment, which in itself is not desirable. So therefore, there is a debate. At one point of time, we are seeing that globalization definitely is not a new process. Somewhere, if we try to track down the chronology of this contemporary globalization, globalization existed in the past, but somewhere in mid 1980s, when the world was witnessing the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of bipolarity, with the end of the bipolar world, collapse of USSR, there was rise of unregulated capitalism, and with the end of Cold War, the world global affairs also had a different trajectory, and one of the guiding forces of this different trajectory was the forces of global trade and finance. We saw that there was Bretton Woods Conference as an aftermath of the Second World War. Now, as a Bretton Woods Conference, we had the establishment of the IMF and the World Bank, and the GATT rounds that was also going simultaneously. Now, GATT also witnesses a change from trade round, it translates itself to a international treaty with the establishment of WTO. Now, once these international organizations give a definite shape to their structure and working, one witnesses the rise of structural adjustment programs in several nations. These structural adjustment programs were reflected in the new economic policies of respective nation states, and as of it, one could see that there were liberalization programs being undertaken, and information technology, particularly the internet and the increase in use thereof, was one of the guiding parameters for all of it to take place. With increase in global contracts, migration to different regions, there was a new global situation, and amidst all this, the outcome was that there was restructuring of the political arrangement. In the words of Milton Friedman, if we can say that globalization is the integration of markets, finance and technologies in a way what is shrinking the world. So therefore, what we see here is from size medium to size small to enabling each of to reach around the globe farther, faster, cheaper than ever before. Now, amidst all this, the political dimension puts forward three important questions which we all must reflect on. Is the importance of nation state increasing, decreasing, or still the same in globalization? If its role is being decreased, what are the causes? And is it being replaced by world governance? So therefore, governance is represented, if we are to understand and express, in interstate systems. Now, to say that world governance will take over nation state somewhere would be wrong, because even political organizations like the UN, like the international organization like IMF and the World Bank, after all, they are made up by nation state representatives. So states are definitely having their own say, but however, the role and mandate of the state is changing because of the change in the context within which states exist in the global apparatus. No doubt today there are non-state organizations from NGOs to civil society, but however, their associations, they are excluded from participation in mechanisms of international governance. So therefore, what we see here is that there are certain contradictions of the global age and which are essential to be pondered over while we look at the dynamics of globalization in the political dimension. That is, legitimacy of the state in international arena is about recognition by other states, and at the same time there are new kinds of issues that are being raised over the legitimacy of non-state actors. So therefore these are certain paradoxes and contradictions of the global age. Then at the same time, when there is a world economic crisis, the solution to the economic crisis comes from deliberations of national economies together, from representatives of national governments taking forward their economic perspective. So therefore what we see here is that at one point the boundaries of nation states are being blurred. Today national economies and national identities are becoming permeable. Rise of a particular language as a standard form of communication, rise of a particular cuisine from one region to being spread all over. The idea of world cuisine, world culture, the idea of new forms of media, namely the social media. At one point of time it is leading to integration, but at the other point of time the dynamics and churning is also leading to a process of fragmentation. At one point of time today there is a rise of idea of a cosmopolitan togetherness, but at the same time one cannot ignore that because of this unequal impact of global forces, there is also renaissance of nationalism in present time. So unification and fragmentation, supranational and subnational regionalism. So many works are being done, and our ultimate idea for the world community is peaceful coexistence in the global village. Now when we try to understand the dynamics of globalization, primarily looking at from the political dimension, let's now go to the third part of our lecture, that is certain reading material or references. This is a very important work which has been edited by Peter de Waeld, Ruth Koopmans and Merkel from Cambridge University Press, contemporary work 2019, that is Struggle Over Borders, Cosmopolitanism and Communitarianism. Now this work gives insight into the role of parties, the role of global social movements as to how they are contesting issues connected to globalization. Today when we look at immigrants, one has to look at whether the jobs are for us or for outside. When we look at issues of free trade, countries are deliberating whether to go for free trade or not, whether to support international integration or not. So therefore there are new fault lines, and these fault lines also depict to us the deepening rift between the elites and the mass publics. At the same time there is rise of populism. So when we look at, the book gives some examples from USA, Germany, Poland, Turkey, Mexico, some countries to state here. That is how debates on climate change, human rights, migration, regional integration and trade are being seen with this idea, with the idea that is, has globalization and the associated idea of cosmopolitanism done good or bad? Or should we go for a revamped approach towards world governance, wherein we have a communitarian outlook that is giving primacy to the particular community or the group over the international? And amidst all this, the milieu, the apparatus of global affairs is going, and the issues that the book raises, that is how today there is a contest on issues connected to globalization, from immigration, free trade to climate change, brings to us an important aspect, that is how is and what could be the role of the state in sorting out these new fault lines. Another important work that is there, that is Globalization and Sovereignty Beyond the Territorial Trap by John Agnew, Roman and Littlefield, 2017. Now this work tells us that no doubt today there are challenges that state sovereignty is in worldwide decline. The work challenges this idea because we also have to look at the alternate perspective that the ideas about sovereignty, the ideas about globalization are often, the book argues, are overstated. State sovereignty, control and authority over space cannot and should not be just be seen contained by state to state territories, and this is the alternate perspective. This is the book is putting, that is, we need new ways of thinking. There is a need for new ways of understanding about geography, about territory of effective sovereignty and the other kinds of the diverse various forms of geographical forms in which sovereignty actually operates in the world. The last work that we must look into account while we are trying to understand the idea of political dimension of globalization is Altered States, Globalization, Sovereignty and Governance. It's a very important work from International Development Research Center, Canada. Now, today we all know that world, because of globalization, moved towards a new ways of governance. This was often called as supranational governance. Now this supranational governance, somewhere what we are seeing here is that old ways are failing. There is a question mark being raised on the efficacy of working of the old ways. Today, once we see conflicts, that if one point of time market forces gave us jobs, but at some time one cannot ignore that these jobs were for few. If one point of time we see technology led to interconnections, then at the time we cannot also ignore that technology changes every time and its accessibility. So there are issues raised that if one point of time there is affluent growth, one cannot ignore the appalling misery also. And then today there is an issue of homogenization. Is the process of globalization, was it there with the mask of westernization? So therefore dynamics of globalization are multifaceted and seemingly contradictory also. Because of the power of transnational corporations, there was undermining the authority and the power of the state and the limits imposed on the government policies to say by currency markets, global finance, transborder politics of NGOs amongst others. And the transfiguring power of global media, definitely it decreased the autonomy of the national government. So therefore globalization is confounding governance because of the turbulent tendency not to integrate but also leading to more fractures and ruptures in future. This is why issues of deglobalization, issues of reglobalization are again being thought over when we look at it from the dynamics of understanding globalization from the political perspective. So gratitude, thank you dear learners, dear listeners, for being with us for understanding the topic of the political dimension of globalization. We hope we have made the concept clear to you. Please do share your feedback. We look forward to your queries if you have any, and we will definitely get back to you with answers for your query. Thank you.